Hi, everyone. This is a Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and I am coming to you on December 24th, 2020, and it is the wrap-up episode. I wanted to just talk about some of the main themes of this year, and also, maybe a little bit about the direction for 2021 as I did the previous year. I cannot believe it, but we're going into that third year with the podcast, and third full year. And it's just pretty exciting that you are a part of it. So, as I think about the why behind creating this, if you recall, I actually wanted to start off just having conversations with leaders who are more emotionally intelligent, those who could really add a lot to the conversation related to caring leadership and just showing up with a lot of heart. And I had no other intention but just to have good conversations and to make sure other people could learn from them as I have. Then over time, what happened is I just really decided that their brilliance, the brilliance of those who I was interviewing, was so big, so vast, that I needed to highlight it in a different way. And that's when I decided to create the book, The Art of Caring Leadership, which comes out in April of 2021. And it includes over 80 of the leaders from this show. Their voices have been amplified inside this book. And it is because they are such great teachers of how to show up with true heart. So I wanted to highlight a few of them because I think some of them really have some key messages. And they're messages that I tend to highlight already in the work that I do and in the messages that I say, even on my solo shows. But let me just reflect, and let's reflect for a minute on some of these past voices for 2020. First, let's talk about Heather Lenser and Garth. They talked about the importance of empathy and how it was so important that we showed up as empathetic leaders in the workplace, understanding where our people are sitting.
Like Heather, I really love the idea of empathy to compassion because it's understanding to action kind of thing. And the horse that I tend to ride a lot is design thinking, but I really like the overlay here in the conversation because what Heather was talking about, or what you all have been kind of chatting about the last couple of minutes, is very much about the one-to-one empathy and compassion. And one thing that design thinking helps us do is do it from kind of like the one-to-many. So when we think about it, almost like I hate to make it sound like leading with heart is always about money, because it's not. But when we think about leading with heart, leading with empathy, and leading with compassion, the better we understand our target audience, whether that's our staff, whether that's our actual paying customer or some other audience, we can go understand them in depth and with an eye toward empathy, and then distill that collective knowledge into very specific themes. So what are the thematic pain points of your audience? And then instead of being just one-to-one, we're now one-to-many. And if I understand those thematic pain points or thematic challenges or issues, and I can distill all of that qualitative, empathetic view, and then I can turn it into a product, a service, something incredibly unique with value that's going to solve a challenge of theirs. And I think that's why when you look at over the last 20 to 30 years, the idea of a quality product or service started with like Malcolm Baldrige Awards and all that stuff 30, 40 years ago. And that was really, really important. But when you look at the companies today that are the most successful, they're the ones that are simplifying people's lives because they found like these compassionate views of their customers that find needs that people have or desires that people have or challenges that they have, and they're solving those challenges with simplicity. And we're pulling complexity out of their lives. It's really a fascinating way of not only looking at the world one-to-one, but one-to-many. And it's very helpful.
Next, we heard also from Diana Steinhoff, and she talked about the importance of compassion and helping our team build resilience, especially now or in a pandemic and even after we come out. But understanding that compassion is the action behind empathy that lets your people know that you do care for them.
I'm always going to be open and honest, but I'm going to do that in a very compassionate manner. And I got to tell you, that skill, it takes a while to hone. To it's a craft. It doesn't just appear. Right? I don't think everybody comes at things from a compassionate manner. And when people hear that word, Heather, they think of soft, right? And it's not at all soft, right? Because in order for you to be able to give somebody feedback, you have to have courage, and you have to think through that individual. Everybody's very different. And so I try to really put myself in, the other person's shoes to see, their vernacular, seeing things from their vernacular, for me to be able to apply feedback and coaching every single day. So my team will tell you that we start off conversations very casually, especially now, during this time of crisis, right? Like, one-to-one meetings are definitely different. We start off by talking about what's happening at home. How are you coping with having your children at home and having to work, or, what is happening with a family member that's ill during this time because you can't really be with them. And so even the one-to-one meetings nowadays have become more personal and more intentful than they used to be when we were maybe in an office environment, or when we were all together trying to just talk about business, right? It's really come down to that human factor for everybody. So, but yeah, I would say that they would describe me as authentic, compassionate, and definitely feedback oriented. I think that is definitely something that I drive every single day. Positive and constructive is important, in a relationship with a team.
And then we also heard from LaToya Lynn and my conversation with her about the late John Lewis and his involvement in the U.S. civil rights movement and her connection to him. And this idea of creating safe spaces for others to follow. And as she reflected on the life of John Lewis and the civil rights movement and how it really impacted her, and that idea of safe space impacted me as well. And it really is a foundation for the work that I do.
Right now, we are watching they're broadcasting John Lewis's funeral services. And I mean, all of the presidents, I have spoken, and he's just been such an amazing figure in everybody's life from a political and civil rights standpoint. John Lewis is pretty much best known as Martin Luther King's right-hand partner. His steady hand kind of kept his heart to the ground and really fought against adversities for people within the South. Well known for being one of the freedom riders in Selma, Alabama, and riding that bus and crossing that bridge to freedom to protest for people of color and Black people especially that were being oppressed, segregated, and really just the height of the Jim Crow era. And he's been a congressman and a part of our American Constitution for many years, have written lots of legislation and fought for everyone's rights. And he's just a divine human being.
And so in that post, you met him, right?
So I had a chance to meet him, and I was asked to do a keynote a few years ago at a private college in New Jersey. And he was part of the keynote was that we had the opportunity to meet Congressman John Lewis, and he was supposed to kind of give us some encouragement, kind of get us, juiced up, right? For which was great, because I think he's a very lively, very powerful and driven speaker. And we were all there, and then something told me to just go up to him. So I went up to him, and he looked at me, and very polite, "How are you? What's your name?" And I told him all the things. And then, I just said to him, I was like, "Why is it so hard?" Now, what I meant with that was I work in tech. I am typically the only Black woman in an executive leadership space. And I'm always there to kind of help and guide people through. And there's never a lot of help for me. So I just had a moment of like, for whatever reason, I can just say to this man, like, why is this hard? And he looked me in the eye and he grabbed my hand very firmly. And he told me that, "Don't worry, you're not alone." And I didn't explain that I was in tech and I do this and I have all these levels and accolades, none of that. I just said, "Why is so hard?" And he immediately knew what I was talking about. And immediately told me that the ancestors are guiding you. Don't worry. And that moment was probably one of the most pivotal moments in my life to hear such encouragement from a man who we didn't really know each other, but we knew each other. And it was only like a 5 or 6 minute interaction. It wasn't a very long, like I went to dinner with him, but it was such a moving moment where he pulled me in and I thanked him. And then when he passed away a couple of weeks ago, it reset my purpose of everything that's happening in the world with violence of Black people, and regulations and the movement around the Black Lives Matters and things and police reform and all those different things. I felt for me that I am in a position to be able to move forward knowing that John Lewis is over all of us. He is all of our ancestors, Black, white, or indifferent, and he is guiding all of us moving forward. And that's what really ignited me to put that post up and share with my community.
And we also heard from the fabulous Michelle Navarez about evaluating our thinking patterns as leaders. She said something like, "Build the evidence for who it is you want to be." Build the evidence.
For me, it comes down to what do we have influence over? And as humans, I think we're inclined to spend a lot of time worrying or perseverating or focused on things that we don't actually have that much control or any control over. So it becomes a waste of our time and energy. And so I always encourage my clients and the people who go through our program to think about that more critically. What do they actually have influence and control over, and what do they not? And so going through that analysis and realizing that they would do well, we would do well to focus on where we have the ability to impact. And so, for example, with our own thoughts and feelings, while many of us, myself included, can't control in the first instance what we find, right? It's kind of like arriving on the scene. And because we are always thinking and feeling and not always, in fact, a lot of time not aware of that sort of background chatter, but it's sort of like you arrive to a scene and suddenly become cognizant of what's happening, like your friends or your client's epiphany of self-awareness, of just not having that perspective of herself before and observing what's unfolding, both in terms of her own relationship and how she's showing up in relationship. So we don't always have the ability to control what comes up. But in that moment of becoming aware of what's there, then we have at least the possibility of choice of how we will relate to whatever it is we find. So whether it's an emotion, a thought, and we have agency in that regard to work with our thinking and relate to our thoughts in a way that's that's more productive. And so if you look at most directly how this is impacting many of us, myself included, is, and again, it just depends, right? Everybody's situations are very different. I do want to say that I'll just acknowledge mine is definitely coming from a place of privilege. There's no doubt about that. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to get my next meal or the roof over my head. But I am kind of stuck with myself a lot, and we're stuck in the same places with it, getting to know our family members again, deeply. And so often what we're left with are our thoughts and emotions. And in any given day, if you notice from the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, we almost live an entire lifetime of emotions in a single day. And so just paying attention to what is that, what's happening, getting curious about what are my habits of mind, not just my outer habits, like when do I eat breakfast, when do I take a walk, things like this, but what are the thought patterns or loops that I find myself revisiting again and again? And are those helpful or are they not? And so it's this sort of inquiry that when we turn our capacity for awareness to a productive point of observation or focus that can actually move us forward by simply observing how we are, then there's a lot of possibility in that. And so then this kind of constricted feeling that I think a lot of us are feeling like one day to the next is just the same as the one before it, we get more space to observe ourselves and to work with the variables of who we are. And that is kind of our own mindset.
And then I made the announcement mid-year of the Art of Caring Leadership. And I shared with you the author's day I had with my publisher. And so you could hear the entire interview there. And that was so cool because I heard my editor, the founder of Barrett Kohler, the company that is publishing my book, speak about the importance of this book.
One of the things as editor that I've really liked about your book on this is that each chapter is about one specific action that you take in order to be a caring leader, make them feel important, look for the greatness in them, involve them, lead the whole person, create a listening culture, provide them safe spaces, empower them to make decisions, build their resilience. And then under each of those main topics, you have many specific actions. How did you come up with this? How did you come up with this framework? How did you get here to these, which I think are so strong as giving it an action orientation instead of just, as you said before, a squishy orientation?
And then we also heard from Benilda Samuels, and she talked about helping others breathe through their challenges and help them through tough times, building resilience.
I think my approach is a little different. My approach is to hold people closer and to allow them to take a pause and some time to just breathe so that they're not overwhelmed and overtaken by the actual situation, right?
Early on in the year, we heard from Cheryl Fullerton, and she helped us to remember to create psychological safe environments where people feel comfortable bringing everything to the table, whether it be their mistakes, any of their ideas, and their creativity.
Well, leaders that over-index on the I'm just there to help, I like people side without having enough of the desire to be the one that calls the shots and has a say, they might not understand and appreciate the impact they have on people and be willing to step up to that. And people need that too. They need trust and confidence that the ship is being steered properly. It's incredibly important to people and their psychological safety.
And lastly, we heard from Don Davis, and he had us focusing on creating a vision for others to follow. This is critical if we think about going into this new year of 2020, how important it is for us to help our team understand the direction we're going, creating that vision.
He says, what's your vision for your life? What's your vision? What's your leadership philosophy? Because you lead men and women, you got to have a direction for your life. Now, back in those days, we used compasses. Like, we didn't have GPS to tell us where to go. Mm-hmm. So when we did land navigation and we did things like that, we used a compass, and you had to have an azimuth. And that azimuth is a general direction that you follow in order to get to your destination. And when you come upon obstacles like a river or a lake or something like that, you point the compass across that obstacle, and you find a reference point, and you put the compass in your pocket. You maneuver, you go to that, you walk around the obstacle, get back on your reference point, and then you take your compass back out and you get back on your azimuth. So a vision is a lot like an azimuth on a compass. It's a direction for your life, and it helps you in the good times and the bads. Whether you can get blinded on the peaks of success, and you can get lost in the valley of despair and troubles, but you need to have a vision. And so that began a mentoring relationship with me that lasted several years while I was a commander. And he helped me develop my leadership philosophy, which is pretty simple. It's just 15 words, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But he taught me. He said, Davis, you got to have a vision. And he said, there's 4 things about a vision. Number 1, you should have one. Number 2, you should write it down so that you can remember it. Number 3, you should post it somewhere where you can see it and remind yourself of it daily. And he said, most importantly, you need to share your vision with those around you so they can keep you on task and on target. Because if you have a vision and you don't share it with anybody and they don't know you have that vision, then when you're not following that vision or when you're not on course, who's going to help you get back on course? So it's those types of things. And that's the objective of having a vision. And so for me, my vision, there's an overarching concept in the military we have. It's called mission first, people always. We never forget that there's a mission to accomplish. We've got to get that done because the people of our country count on us to do that. But we never forget that it's with people, by people, for people. And so mission first, people always is overarching. And there's an art and science to leading people in that way. The science piece is pretty easy. It's making sure that folks have the things they need to do what they do. If you're a heavy equipment operator, do you have your licenses and your equipment to do the things that you need to do, and your safety equipment? Do you have insurance? Do you have all those types of things that are actual needs? And then the other part of it is more of an art. And the art part is understanding what people's desires and wants are. And that's a little bit more difficult because it requires a relationship with the people that you lead and the people that you serve. And so you get an understanding of what someone's desires and wants are, and you match that up with the organization. And to the extent that you can match them up and move both forward, you do so. And that's easy. But then you also got to be able to look someone in the eye when they don't match up and say, that's not something that we can do, but maybe there's some other options that we can help you elsewhere.
So now we are at the end of 2020, and we are going into a new year, unprecedented, not knowing exactly what's going to happen in the direction it's going to be. But the one thing I can tell you, if you haven't gathered this from listening to all the many episodes and all the many leaders that I've spoken to, we get to choose how we show up. We get to choose our thinking. We get to choose our behaviors. We get to choose our interactions with those we lead, whether formally or informally. Leaders with heart know that they can exercise emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-control, so that they can show up as their best selves, which then in turn allows their people, those they lead, to turn and show up as their best selves as well. So hopefully you enjoyed 2020 with me, and that you look forward to 2021 and all that it has to offer to us. I guarantee you it's going to be a great year. Yes, it might be change. Yes, it might be uncomfortable, but we will flourish together. Look out for some changes. The book will be coming out in April, but there'll be some other tweaks and changes I want to make to the podcast to just continue to add value and to increase your learning. Don't forget to interact with me. Go ahead and connect with me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger, or you can find me at my websites at employeefanatics.com or at heatheryounger.com. Remembering that what I do in my organization is help organizations create listening cultures. We do that by doing facilitated roundtables, helping with action planning post surveys for employees, diversity, equity, inclusion surveys, and listening sessions, and all kinds of training and executive coaching. I would be happy to work with you and your team in any way possible. Cheers to 2021. If you'd like to learn more about the work we do at Employee Fanatics around helping leaders lead with heart, go ahead and visit us at employeefanatics.com. That's employee, FANATIX.com. We look forward to seeing you. Definitely reach out to us. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter as well. We do send out a very robust newsletter with lots of great insights every single week. Be well.